All right, good evening. Hope you're all doing well. Gemar Chasima Tova. Today, Baruch Hashem, we're starting yet another parak in Maseches Bava Basra, the seventh parak, which is referred to as Beis Kur. A Beis Kur is a reference to a size of a field, in and of itself, not exciting. But we need to see what the context of this parak is and what this Mishnah is talking about. So let's jump right in. Bottom of Kuf Beis, Amud Beis, at the open of the new parak. Omer lechaveru. Let's say that I'm a salesman and I'm selling a piece of property to you. And here was what I shared with you. Beis kur afar ani mocher lach. I'm selling you a beis kur's worth of dirt. Now, dirt has nutrients in it and can make things grow. So with this kind of language of beis kur afar ani mocher lach, it has to be that the food is able, that the dirt is able to grow things. So let's say if I tell you that, but it's filled with rocks and it's not growable, then that's a problem. That won't work. And therefore, if I tell you that language of Afar and Hayusham Nekaim Amukim Asar Tvachim, there were divots or holes in the ground that were 10 Tvachim deep, Oslaim Gavonya Tvachim, or if there were solid rock that were 10 Tvachim protruding from the ground. Einan Nimdadin Ima. So that's not considered to be part of the purchase. So let's say I gave you a block of space. It's 100 feet by 100 feet. We agree. That's what we agree to. But there's a number of these protrusions and dips and divots in the ground that are 10 tefachim deep and or tall, respectively. So then your 100 by 100 is insufficient. You have to add more land. We subtract from the area of the sale that which breaks the rules. So that means, again, if you have a hole that's 10 or deeper, or if you have rock that's 10 or deeper. So the Gemara says, Einan nimdaden ima, that's not considered to be part of the sale. Pachos mikan, if the divots and or the protrusions are less than 10 tvachim, either deep or tall, respectively, then nimdaden ima, that's considered to be normal. We would call that in English our margin of error. Yes, I sold you a field for growth, 100%. That doesn't mean that every square inch is going to be growable. There's going to be a couple of rocks. There's a rock protrusion over here. There's a little divot over there. It's just part of life. Sometimes when I'm like driving through southern Illinois, you see these fields and you see that after it rains, there's a section of the field that because of its sloping is not plantable. Just the way things are. So the Gemara says, even if I'm selling you a field for planting, if the standard deviation, if the margin of error here is less than 10 tfachim out of the ground, protruding, or in the ground as a whole, then they are nimdad nima. Then you just have length times width, no problem at all, and everything is included. However, the imamar ki beis kur afar. I didn't sell you a beis kur, but I sold you ki beis kur afar, approximately that amount. So then, afilu hayu sham nekaim amukim yoser me'asar tvachim, oslem gavon yoser me'asar tvachim, hare elu nimdad nima. If it were to be the case that I gave you an approximation, not an exact amount, I don't know how it works with large pieces of property, you do acreage, I don't know, whatever it is. If I'm giving you a very specific number down to a decimal point, 0.94, okay, then it has to actually be livable, workable. But if I give you an approximate, this area at 123 Main Street and all of the property that's with it. So when it's a little looser, so that actually is helpful. We're now going to talk about a similar idea in the world of erchin, in the world of hektish, where a person is makdish something, and let's see if everything is still going to be considered part of the hektish. Before we start this open of the Gemara at the bottom of Kuf Beis and Beis, we have to remember that there's something called a stei achuza. A stei achuza is a piece of property that a family held onto, an ancestral piece of property from the times of the Chiluk of Eretz Yisrael of Yehoshua. If in fact a person were to have such a property and they were to be makdish it, they would be able to redeem it. But the redemption rate was prescribed by the Torah as zera chomer seorim chamishim shekel kasab. The stei achuza would be redeemed at 50 shekel. If, however, I decided to be makdish a non-stei achuza, just a regular piece of property that I owned, I could also redeem it, but only at market value. It wasn't prescribed by the Torah. You go look up, how much is this quality, this size of a property, and look it up in whatever the street value is, and that's what would work. So let's now pick apart this Mishnah. This Mishnah can be found in Maseches Kedushin as well as Erchin. Tanan Hasan. Hamaktish sadehu. If a person is maktish stei achuza b'shas yovel, the rules of stei achuza only apply to shas yovel. We're not going to talk about that now. No sein lo. If he then redeems it, what does he get back? No sein lo the beis zera chomer seorim 50 shekel kesef. So that's what we had already said, that if it's stei achuza and it's the time of yovel, you were maktish it and then you decided to take it back. So then you redeem it at a cost of 50 shekel. What if there were nekaim? Hayusham nekaim amukim yud tvachim oslaim gvon yud tvachim, similar to our Mishnah, but in a different space, right? Our Mishnah was dealing with mechira, right? If I am buying a property and there are nekaim, is that included in the mechira? Yes or no? Here we're asking about hektish. What happens when it's included in hektish? So as the bottom line says, if there were nekaim 10 deep, oslaim gvon yud tvachim, then ein nimdadin ima. Those then are not included. And that also means that they don't have the same reimbursement rate, right? If what you're saying is that the 10 protrusion or the 10 deep is not included in the stei achuza, that means its redemption rate is not based on 50, but its redemption rate is going to be based on market value. However, pachos mikanim dadanima. However, if it were to be the case that there was less than 10 tvachim of a deviation up or down, if there were to be less than 10 tvachim in a stei achuza, that would all be included and would be part of the reimbursement rate of the stei achuza. But says the Gemara, ve'amai, I don't understand. Why would we say that if there was a rock that was 10 tvachim tall in the stei achuza, why wouldn't it have the same halachic status as the stei achuza? It should still have the same hektish status on its own. It shouldn't be put into the category of non-stei achuza. It should be stei achuza and be reimbursed at that rate. Why are we saying that it doesn't have the regular rates of kedusha of the stei achuza? If you want to say that really a stei achuza only comes in block sizes, it's prescribed sizes, that the only time that there is going to be a base core, the only time that there's going to be hektish of stei achuza, if the exact size is a base core or larger, so then lo kachi, that's not true, because ve'atanya, we have a brisa that specifically includes smaller than base core size of field as stei achuza. Where do we see this? Ve'atanya, we have a brisa. The pasuk says sadeh, matama lomar. Why do we need the word sadeh in the pasuk? We'll see in a moment what the pasuk is. Lefisha ne'amar zera chomer seorim b'chamishim shekel kesef, because the pasuk tells me that if I plant a chomer seorim, it's worth 50 shekel. Einli elo shehikdish be'inyan zeh. I only know about a base kur. Minayin the rabot lesech, which is a smaller amount. V'chatzi lesech, a still smaller amount. Sa'a tarka v'chatzi tarka. Talmud lomar sadeh mikol makom. So now when we look at the pasuk on the side, the pasuk from Vayikra Kav Zayin Tes Zayin reads, V'im mistei achuzaso yakdish. Why did you add the word stay? We already know about base core. So what the Gemara is saying is that the word sadeh is coming to teach us that no matter what size a field is, it still is begeder stei achuza. And if that's the case, don't argue that the reason why the protrusion is excluded is because it's not the right shiur. It is the right shiur. So to this, the Gemara responds, you're right, and we're a quarter of the way down on Kuf Gimel Amud Aleph. Amar Reb Ukva Bar Chama, Hacha b'nekayim meleim mayim askinan, dela b'nei zriyaninu. What we were talking about in the case of the stei achuza is where there was a divot that was 10 deep, and it was filled with water. It's unplantable, it's unusable. And because of that, you can no longer call it stei achuza. Stei achuza is a place that is going to be plantable. So it says the Gemara, Dekanami, I can show you why this is true. Dektani dumya deslaim. We saw in the brisa that it is dumya deslaim, that it should be the same as a rock. Now, is a rock plantable? No. So it must be that the hole in the ground was also unplantable. How is a hole in the ground unplantable if it's not made out of rock? Simple. It's filled with water. And you have no way of draining it, whatever the details are. Shma mina. We therefore see that our case from the Mishnah in Erchen / Kedushin, it's found in both places, but its primary source is in Erchen, that the Mishnah, when the Mishnah at the open of the Gemara, which talks about a ste'achuzah, when it excludes from the measurement of a ste'achuzah, from the reimbursement rate of the 50 per base kur, that must be talking about a case where there's water, and that's dumya desela. Hachi, says the Gemara, that if something is filled with water, then it should be then afilu pachos mikan nami. Hold on one second. This is a beautiful question. At the very top of this page, the line says pachos mikanim dadanima, that if the deviations on the ste'achuzah are less than 10, so then they're included. But what if there's water in the hole? You just said a second ago that if it's more than 10 with water, it's unplantable. That's why it's removed from the measure of ste'achuzah. But over here, it seems not that way. Over here, when it comes to pachos mikan, when the deviation is only 8, a hole of 8, and it's filled with water, there we seem to say that that's still ste'achuzah. So why is that? Says the Gemara, because hanhu nagani da'ara mikru. These little holes in the ground are considered to be small little cracks in the ground. Namely, they're basically batel to the ground. When you see a tiny little divot, nobody's, like when you rent a car and they like have this little circle shape, like if the scratch is smaller than this circle, then we just don't care. They have these rules. You're buying a field. There's going to be some parts of the field that are going to stink. It's just the way things are. So this is called nagane de'ara. Or if it's protruding, shadre da'ara. It's the spine of the land. Again, a little bit of a muscle. Sometimes there's a little bit of a rock protrusion. So the way the world is, everybody get over it. It's just part of making a purchase. So therefore, you're right. Even though it's filled with liquid, and even though it's unplantable, but that's considered nagane da'ara, or if it's protruding, it's considered shadre da'ara, the spine of the land, it's part of the land. So that's how we answer up the brisa, the Mishnah, I should say, about hektish. We had said that if it's more than 10 tvachim, it's excluded from ste'achuzah. That's because it's unplantable. But if it's less than 10, even if it's unplantable, we still include it because it's just part of the land. Okay, hachamai. What would we say about these applications from the world of hektish back to our Mishnah of sale? Now remember, what we're talking about right now, beginning with the Gemara, is what happens with hektish when the field has deviations. Let's bring these principles back to our Mishnah. Omar Rav Papa would say that in our case in the Mishnah, afal pi she'ein malayin mayim, even if in mechira there is no water in the holes, they're still excluded from the mechira. So that's a diversion, right? That's a totally divergent approach. When it comes to the world of hektish, if there's water, it's excluded. If there's no water, it's not excluded. But in our case of mechira, if I sell you a field and there's a dip that's more than 10 tfachim and there's no water in it, even if there's no water in it, it's not included in the sale. My timer halfway down, because ein adam rotzeh she'iten ma'osav. Nobody wants to spend money b'makom echad on one place, but it's going to look like patched clothing. V'yiru lo kishnayim u'shloshim makomos. I want one field. I don't want to buy a field that's broken up into pieces. So afal pi, you're right that it's technically plantable. When there's a divot of 10, if it's made of grass, you're right. I could put seeds down there, but it's very hard to harvest. I don't want my field to look like that. And therefore, we deviate from the world of hektish, and we have different halachos in regards to the world of mechira. Says the Gemara, Maskif lo Ravina. Wait 1 second. How can you say that? But wait a second. We said it was dumya deslaim, and just like a sela is unplantable, so too over here, maslaim de la b'nei zriya ninhu, af hani nami de la b'nei zriya ninhu. That means to say that if it is plantable, it should be included. But if it isn't plantable, it should be excluded. That is how we learned this Gemara by hektish. The problem is that it's akasha and our Gemara by mechira. If what you're saying is that dumya de hektish is dumya de slaim, is that the hole has to be similar to the rock and that it's unplantable, that then would imply that by mechira that it should only be excluded if it's unplantable. Namely, if there's water in it. But if there's no water, we shouldn't have excluded it. Why do we exclude it? So says the Gemara, because kiktani dumya deslaim. When we make the equivalence between a sela, which is a rock, and the unplantable divot, which we said was filled with water, that's only apachos mikan. That's only dealing with the language of pachos mikan. Look at the top line of this page. The language of pachos mikan, namely, when the whole is less than 10. When the whole is less than 10, then you're right. Then we look at the fact that it should be the same, it should be equivalent, the rock and the divot. However, when it's a greater than 10, we don't distinguish at all. And in fact, even if it's plantable, we still exclude it from the sale. Nice and clean. This needed a little bit of a matrix chart, but it's not a very difficult piece of Gemara. Now let's dig into the next part. Pachos mikanim dadanima. Amar Rav Yitzchak, Trashim she'amru. When we talk about these rocks that are included in the sale, that's only if they're Beisar Ba'as Kabin, only if they are of a certain measure. But if they were to be larger, that would be problematic. And Amar Rav Ukva Bar Chama, Behu shemuvlain bechameshes kabin. It has to be that it's spread out at least over 5 kabin. If it's tighter than that, then that is not sellable. Rav Chia Bar Abba Amar Rav Yochanan says, Behu shemuvlain beruba shel sadi. He has an opposite approach. If it's spread out throughout the entire field, which means that, let's just say in our modern terms, you have your very expensive harvesting machine that's going over all, you're going to ruin the harvesting machine because there's rocks everywhere. So then that's a big problem. But we don't really know exactly how all of this works because there are so many different iterations of how rocks can appear in a field. The Gemara is going to ask a host of Teiku questions, and we're going to be stopping halfway down on the next short Amud at the Mishnah on Kuf Gimel Amud Beis, and then we'll pick up again tomorrow. So let's ask a few Teikus. Boy Reb Chia Bar Abba, Ruban b'miuta. Let's say most of that amount is over a small portion of the field. Umiuta and beruba. Or there's a small amount spread out over a large part of the field. How would we factor that in according to these Amorai? Mahu, Teiku, we don't know. Last line, and turning to the top of Kuf Gimel Amud Aleph, Boy Rav Yirmiyah. What if the rocks were shiur, which in this case means a circle? What if they were mahu? What if they were kishura mahu? What if they were in a line? What if there were eats tadinin? What if they were like the stadium? What does it mean, like the stadium? So take a look at eats tadin in Rashi. It looks like the horns of a bull, where the shape of the rock kind of deviates outward a little bit. That's that second picture there, the eats tadin. Mahu. Derech akalasim. What if we have a zigzag type of thing? Mahu, that's the picture of the, what's that letter called? Is that a lambda or something? Looks like an E. What's the, epsilon? Is that E? It looks like this shape over here. Yeah. It's a sigma? Oh, nice. I have no idea. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, the third one down. So if there is a shape like that, or really any other zigzag shape, the Rashbam was just giving an example. In all of these cases, Teiku. In other words, if you're selling a field that has a rock in it, that has rocks in it, and they have a shape of a certain kind, it's unclear as to whether that should detract from the length versus width sale of the property. I'm giving you lot X. Well, if lot X has a lot of rocks in it, do we reduce or not reduce? We don't know. All these questions are Teiku. Shape of a line, shape of a circle, shape of a grid. We have no idea. Not pasha. Obviously, if both parties are super transparent and willing, then the sale goes through. That's not what we're discussing. We can agree to that, but that wasn't the case. So it says the Gemara, Tana im haya seli yechidi. What if there was one rock and it was just outside or just on the border? Afilu kolshu, even if it's on the border at all, ein nimda dima, it's not included. If it was close to the border but not on the border, afilu kolshu ein nimda dima, it also would not be included. And on this note, Boy Ravashi, what if there's afar milemata vitsun malamala? Sorry, I skipped a line. Boy Rav Papa, mufsak afar bein taim mahu. What if there's rock, but beyond the rock there's a small amount of dirt and then the border? What would we have said about that case? Teiku, we don't know. And the last question for the day, Boy Ravashi, it's really two questions. Afar milemata vitsun malamala. What if there was dirt right underneath the rock and a rock on top? So would that be considered to be part of the sale or not? Or the reverse, afar milemala vitsunma milemata. Or if there was dirt right on top, but right underneath that is rock, mahu. In all of these cases, Teiku, we just don't know. So we'll stop right here, and Amir Hashem will come back together tomorrow night on Monday night to learn Daf Kuf Daled. If you're interested in seeing what a lot of Rashbam looks like, just look at Kuf Daled Amud Beis, because there is no Tosfos, there's about 12 lines of the Gemara, and the rest is a holiday for Phil.
It's literally a holiday.
Yeah, but for people who are learning with Rashbam, it's not a holiday. All right. Wishing you all a beautiful night.